Hey everyone, this video is going to look at creating and editing smart objects in Photoshop. Smart objects are a type of container that can hold multiple layers within Photoshop. They're another form of non-destructive editing and offer a greater range of flexibility when you are creating certain types of designs. Essentially, smart objects create nested links within your document so that you can heavily modify an image or an object with transforms, warps, filters, and other adjustments while still fully preserving the integrity of the original image. To give you just a quick idea of the benefit of smart objects, I'm just going to make a change to this image here to kind of show you what happens. I'm going to unlock this layer by clicking on the lock and then hitting Command T to bring up my transform. I'm going to click on this corner here and I'm going to hold Option and Shift and drag towards the middle to scale this image down dramatically. Once I hit Enter to preserve this change, if I ever wanted to undo this and I scaled back up at a later date, you can see that I fully lose a lot of the image quality when that happens. More often than not, you're not going to be applying a transform that dramatic, but it's still worth seeing the type of degradation that happens with this type of destructive editing. So let me hit Command Z to back up. And instead, I'm going to make this a smart object and do the exact same thing so that you can see what happens. I'm going to do this by right-clicking and hitting Convert to Smart Object. Note that if you right-click on a different aspect of the layer, sometimes you'll get this. That means you clicked on the image itself in the layer. If you click on the name of the layer, you can get your Convert Smart Object. Now there's a little icon in the corner of this layer that indicates that it's a smart object. Now, if I hit Command T and hold Option and Shift and scale this down dramatically, apply my transform, then scale back up, I don't lose any image quality at all. The reason this happened is because a smart object takes a layer and moves it into a protected container. So I'm actually going to double click on this smart object and we're going to see that a completely separate file opened up in my tabs. You can see my original file is this DSC TIFF file, whereas when I double clicked on my smart object, it opened up a separate tab called layer0.psb. I can make changes in here, such as colorization things that maybe I definitely want to be a permanent change. For example, I'm going to drop it into black and white and then hit Command S to save, and that we're going to see that that is going to update in our original file. And now I have the black and white image in my actual TIFF. I can do really dramatic changes to this image in my actual layered file. Let's add a bunch of noise. We're going to make this really, really grainy so that we can definitely see that change happen. Let's apply a really intense transform to this just to really emphasize what's happening here. I'm going to grab Distort, which will temporarily turn off my filter. And I'm going to pull these corners in at like a really intense perspective as if this photo was going on the side of a building or something. I'm going to hit Enter and my grain is back. In my tab, I'm going to go back over to that layer that had the original image. And now I'm going to turn off that black and white filter. I'm going to hit Save again. Wait for it to save, and then we're going to go back to our original TIFF, and the grain is still there, so is the perspective change, but the color of the image is back. As far as practical applications of smart objects, the first place that designers usually encounter them is when they're creating digital mockups. So let's look at how this designer used them to enhance the look of her portfolio. So this student created some of these original designs for these posters and then used templates that she downloaded from sources like Adobe Stock to create digital mockups for the designs. This is a circumstance where maybe her vertical poster didn't quite fit nicely into the template she had designed for herself. So finding a template that allowed her to still showcase her artwork is a great way to elevate the overall appearance of it. Here's another nice example of a flat iteration where she's just highlighting one poster. And something like this where she's using it to show off an entire Instagram campaign. So now let's take a look at how one of these templates might be constructed and how we could use smart objects within it. I'm going to go over to a few different files I've downloaded. I downloaded a poster comp, a square poster comp, a comp for a social media campaign, and a bus stop. Let's start with this bus stop template. The creator of this file made something very basic where we're looking at a simple background image where they then have their smart object that can easily be replaced, an exposure setting to reduce the brightness of it, a shadow applied over the corner, a highlight applied in the bottom, and some reflections added in. This gives you a good idea of a nice simple template that's one that you could even create for yourself if you couldn't find the exact right one online. In this file, the layer has already been converted to a smart object, so I'm just going to double click on it to open up its nested PSB file. Note that just like what happened with the portrait I was working with, my original image doesn't actually have any type of a perspective warp on it. This makes it easier so that you can be designing basic graphics that could actually go into production and then show them off in a template format if you wanted to. I'm going to pull some posters that I designed and show you how these could fit into this type of template specifically. So I'm just going to hit return to place my image, and I'm going to hit save. I'm going to go back to my comp bus stop, and I can see that my new poster is right there. If I wanted to swap this out for one of the different posters I designed, I can just go back in, grab a different design, and place it. Let me turn off my original two and delete them actually. Hit save, and then navigate back to my bus stop to see how it updated. Let's take a look at some of the other templates that I downloaded. This poster template, for example, has some really nice textures applied to it to make it look like a wheat paste poster applied onto a rough surface. Most well-designed templates will have something like what's written here, where you can see edit this, so that you know that this is the thing that you actually want to be editing. And this has a lot of filters applied to it. Some Gaussian blurs, some smart filters, a little bevel on the edges, lots of stuff going on here. Whereas a template like this is very simple, but still gives you a lot of flexibility. So in this case, we see your image goes here, meaning I would double click on this one. My file would open and I would place my image. And they were even kind enough to give us a couple of different backgrounds to use. Sometimes these templates that you download are much more complicated, like this one that you see here. This one takes advantage of another neat feature of smart objects, which is the fact that they can be nested. So I'm actually going to click on this first one here, cell phone image here, which I know is going to replace this area in the middle. If I double click here, and it opens up its completely separate PSB, I now have the ability to edit a lot of the stuff here. They even gave me text to edit, which is really helpful. You can see that I'm already in one layer of smart object, and this one has 3 more smart objects in it. So I'm just going to double click on some of these and fill them with some content that I have on my computer. So for this upper image, I double click on it and it opens its own separate PSB. And now I can replace this content. And I'm just doing this by clicking and dragging. You could also do file place. I'm going to pull some of the pop art selfie demos that I have. Place this. I'm going to hit save. Now note that when I go all the way back to my social media campaign template, it hasn't updated yet. That's because I did not update the middle round of this. I can see that change here, but I did not save this smart object yet. I'm going to swap out this user pic for a different image that I have loaded, just for the sake of the demo. Hit Command S. Let's go back to the cell phone image. Let's replace the lower image with that same one. Command S. And I'm going to hit Command W to close out of these tabs that I already have saved. Now that this cell phone image here, PSB, looks nice and clean, I'm just going to hit Command S on that. And I'm going to pop back to my social media campaign. And I can see that the whole interior of this updated. One very important thing to remember with smart objects, and this would especially be true of a template like this one, is that because your file is retaining more information and preserving all of these nested internal links, your files can get significantly larger. So make sure you use them wisely. Now, up until this point, every image that we've placed into Photoshop as a smart object has automatically embedded. It's the same as when we would have gone to File, Place Embedded, or Place Linked. This is the same as it would have been in Illustrator, where your embedded files live in the file and have no connection to their original source, whereas a linked file is connected to its original source. Let's take a quick look at the difference between the two and how we might be able to use them. So I'm going to do File, New, just to give myself a new clean document to work with. Going to give myself a large, wide document. And I'm going to go to my Finder and drag a couple specific files in here. Up until this point, we've just been clicking and dragging. Note that this time I'm dragging an Illustrator file. That Illustrator file has multiple artboards in it, and I'm going to grab this one and hit OK. I'm going to scale it down just a little bit and move it over so that I can have two of them in the same document. I'm going to go back to Finder and I'm going to drag the exact same file in, but this time I'm going to hold Option while I do it. And I'm going to grab the same artboard and scale it down so that we can see them side by side. Note that now in my Layers panel, one of these is an embedded smart object and one of these is a linked smart object. And we can see the difference looking at the actual icons in the layers. If I were to double click on this linked one, it's actually going to open up my Illustrator file with all of those artboards in it. I'm going to make a change to this color triangle here so that we can see the change happen. I'm going to switch it to this yellow color and hit Command S to save. Flip back over to Photoshop and note that my linked one updated and my embedded one did not. This can be really helpful if you need to start putting designs into some type of template like this one, but they're not 100% finalized yet. Just remember to make sure you always double check that the layer's actually updated, especially if they're linked. When you have a nested file like this one, you would need to double click into all of these smart objects and make sure that they each one was updated, closed them, saved the next layer, and closed out of that in order to make sure your final comp is actually complete the way you want it to look. And that gives you an overview of smart objects in Photoshop.